Hey guys, thanks for joining me. I've done a couple of videos on Licitti battery products, like their battery box where you can just drop in kind of a stock Group 31 100 amp hour battery into it. It's got everything you need in terms of ports, AC inverter, limited charge controller for solar, but it really allows you to kind of very simply DIY a very quick and easy power station for a pretty low cost per watt hour. And then I think I also did a video on kind of a build your own, I forget whether it was a 200 or 300 amp hour battery kit. Very cool. I'll leave links to those videos if you want to go check those out. I'll put those in the description below for you. But today's video, we're going to take a look at their new CyberBox 3000. Now, as the name might indicate, 3000 watt inverter module up on the top. It does already also have a solar charge controller. It's got a bunch of DC input output ports here on the side that are very large Anderson connectors. I'll talk more about those in a minute. But it's got a variety of outputs here. It's got 3 AC outputs that are, I think, a full 120, but we're going to test that. And then we've got 3 12-volt car socket outlets here. And then each one of these sockets on the top, I'll put a picture up there so you can see them, but each one has a Type A USB port and a Type C USB port. So 3 of each. And then you've got a disconnect switch over here and then a switch over there. And believe it or not, this one actually does have wireless charging on top, which is kind of cool. Now you can actually get this thing in 2 different capacities. This particular one is the 300 amp hour version, but you can also get it in a 200 amp hour version. I think the 300 is probably the better deal because it comes in, I think, at $1,680, which is a very attractive, just under 44 cents a watt hour. And I think the 200 amp hour version is only about $100 less than that, but you're getting 50% more capacity with the 300 amp hour version. So what does it come with for $1,680? Let me step out of the frame here and I'll show you. All right, so first of all, it does not have integrated charging. So you do have to have, if you're going to charge it via AC, you do need a charger for that, and it does come with one. This is a 40 amp charger. So it would probably take you somewhere between 5 and 6 hours to fully charge this thing, which sounds like a long time, but keep in mind this is 3.8 kilowatts of capacity. So very high capacity, and it's got one of these large Anderson connectors on it, and you can plug that into one of the couple of those ports here that's available for that. These are both in and output 50 amp ports on the side. It also comes with this monster set of alligator clips with an even larger Anderson style connector, and this is up to 175 amps continuous, or even higher than that for a momentary surge that you could use for starting a car. So you can jump start a car with this or charge the car's battery. And there's another trick that I'll show you in a minute, but it does come with that. It also comes with this alternator wire, so you can connect this to your positive battery terminal. This gets plugged into the corner back here, I think on this side over here. So this is a way to have the unit be able to detect if the car is running so that it can be charging. And if the car is not running, then this would detect that there's not enough voltage and it would keep you from depleting your car's battery. Now it also comes with a whole bunch of these little port covers with little cables on them that you can use to kind of keep them all in one place. So that's kind of nice. If you're not using those ports, you probably want to keep these covers on there to keep dust and pests and debris from getting in there. Now it also does come with a couple of clamps, and there are pre-tapped holes on the side of this unit to allow you to bolt this down for an RV or camper installation. And it does come with screws for all of that in this little kit here. They actually give you a bunch of these extra Anderson connectors. The yellow one is for solar. The blue one is for vehicle charging. So you could make your own little car charging cable with the blue one. And these are real simple to do. In fact, there are multiple videos up on YouTube that show you how to use these connectors and crimp cables with them, how to terminate cables with this style. But it's nice that they give you 2 of the standard 50 amp input output, the car charger and the solar cable extra. And then they also give you an MC4 cable to solar. Now the solar input on this is fairly limited. I think it's up to 25 volts, and we're going to test that to find out what that actually translates into in real world functional use. And then we'll see if maybe there's a better way to solar charge this. But this all comes standard with the unit out of the box. So, all right, let's jump into the testing and see how this thing performs. Now, as I mentioned, these giant alligator clamps that come with it can be used to jump start a car, but there's also another neat trick that you can do with this. Since this port is very high output, It's 175 amps rated continuous, and I'm sure you can get as a peak surge quite a bit more than that out of it. But you can actually connect very easily up to another battery. So I happen to have another 300 amp hour battery here that is fully charged, so it's going to have a higher voltage than this one. So if I connect these alligator clamps up to this battery is going to start charging this battery because they're automatically going to try to equalize their charge. So you could basically treat this like an expansion battery by plugging in this monster Anderson connector, and then over here, clamp onto the negative, clamp onto the positive. And if we take a look at the screen here, if I zoom in on this for you, you can see we are now pulling just a little, almost 16 amps or about 200 watts from this battery over to this one, and they are going to equalize their charge. And I can continue to use this. I can turn the AC inverter on and I can draw power. This battery will keep feeding this continually. So it's like expanding the capacity of this unit just by using this big alligator clip cable. So kind of a cool option. All right, now at the moment, if I zoom in here, you can see I'm pulling 7 watts and about half an amp. And that is because I have the AC inverter currently turned on. So that is actually pretty good. So I'm kind of expecting some pretty decent numbers on the AC output capacity test. But right now, let's see if we can dual charge this. I have no doubt we will be able to, but let's go ahead and verify that. So I've got solar on the side right now. I've not turned it on yet, but I want to kind of see what we're getting. So let's go ahead and turn on solar, and I think this number will start ticking up here. And we're going to get a net value once the solar starts ticking up here, because we are, like I said, we are pulling about 7 watts on the AC inverter. So we're getting about 250, 260 watts. So let me go ahead and hook up the AC inverter here, and we're going to just see if we can solar charge and use the charger here at the same time. I have no doubt that there's no reason why this shouldn't work. So this is, as I said, a 40 amp charger. So this should add another, I don't know, 600 watts or something like that. So now we're getting a total of 811 watts. So you can charge it with the charge box here while you're also solar charging it. Let's find out if you can pass through charge here. Now, so we're charging and we've got AC inverter turned on. And I've got my little space heater here that is now kicking out heat. And you can see we're getting net watts in, because I'm pulling about 200 watts off the space heater. If I turn it off, this number will probably tick back up. Yeah, now we're back up to 807 watts. So you do get pass-through power. You can be charging it and outputting at the same time, both DC and AC. So I like that. So we're not going to bother testing UPS mode with this, because this does not have a uninterruptible power supply switch over circuit. No point in testing that, but we'll run all of the other tests and find out how the DC capacity is, how the capacity out of the AC inverter is, and yeah, all the usual things, how noisy the power is, all that sort of stuff. All right, let's jump into it. All right, let's find out how noisy or not the AC inverter is by checking the harmonic distortion. And we're going to use an old guitar amp to do that. So I've got it plugged into grid power right now as a baseline. This is actually not technically grid power. This is the solar system for my barn. But it is very quiet, so it should give us a pretty realistic example of normal grid power, clean signal or clean power. And then we're going to connect it to the AC inverter over here and see if there's a difference. So this is the baseline test. Let's listen and find out how it sounds under grid power. All right, pretty clean, just a very small, barely perceptible hum. So let me go ahead and hook it up to the inverter here. We'll turn it on and see how it behaves. All right, I got the AC inverter powered up. Let's go ahead and rerun that test on this CyberBox 3000. Okay, honestly, I'm a little surprised by that. That was actually very clean. I don't hear a difference between the AC inverter output here off the CyberBox 3000 and grid power. So they are both very clean, and you could actually use this for ham radio operations or remote power source for a PA or a guitar amp, sound system, that kind of thing, probably without any kind of a line conditioner at all. So yeah, it sounds perfectly normal, just like grid power. So that's very good performance, and frankly a little bit unexpected from a budget system like this. Okay, let's do a DC discharge capacity test on this monster CyberBox 3000. Now this has a massive 300 amp hour battery, which at 12.8 volts equates to 3,840 watt hours, if I do the math correctly, hopefully. And it has multiple 12 volt cigarette lighter sockets. I'm going to see if we can use two testers at one time to reduce the overall test time here on the DC outputs. And we're going to just basically, hopefully if that works, we're going to add these up and get a combined total of how many watt hours usable we actually get out of that 300 amp hour battery. So let's power this on. And we are at 100% state of charge. Let's go ahead and see if we can get the first one running here. I've got it set to pull 10 amps. Now I'm reading 13.7 volts out of the same socket here. Let's go ahead and dial this up. All right, made it to 10. Okay, so I got 10 amps coming out of both of these testers. We are counting up the watt hours. It's going to be a while. This says about 14 hours remaining, so we're going to check in tomorrow and see if we can add these up and find out how many watt hours we actually were able to catch. So, see you tomorrow. All right, looks like our DC discharge capacity test is done. Let's zoom in here and see what kind of numbers we actually ended up with. All right, so we're gonna have to add up the numbers on both testers here. And on the left, you can see we got 153 amp hours. And on the right, we got 154 amp hours. So that's 307 amp hours out of a rated 300 amp hours. So we actually exceeded the amp hour rating. Now, in terms of the actual watt hours, it's a little bit of a different story. On the left, we got 1,632.3 watt hours. And on the right tester, we got 1,641.78 watt hours. So if you add those together, you get 3,274 watt hours. Now that's out of a rated 3840, so that gives us a usable capacity of about 85%, maybe just a little higher than 85%. And I would put that on the high side of average, maybe just a little bit above average in terms of usable capacity with these testers out of the DC ports. So very good numbers on this CyberBox 3000. Let's get this thing fully charged back up, and we're going to do an inverter capacity test and see how that performs. All right, let's do an AC discharge test, capacity test on this CyberBox 3000. I'm going to use my Wave 2 air conditioner unit since it's too hot in here to try to run a test with portable heaters. So we're going to get this thing going. Let me go ahead and turn the unit on. You can see we're fully charged, 100%. Turn on the AC inverter. And this should click on in just a second. There we go. Now let's go ahead and turn the air conditioner on. It should fire up. And we're going to start counting up the kilowatt hours. This is going to take a while. So we will check back when the AC has shut itself down and the power station here is all the way down to 0%. And we're no longer outputting. So find out how many usable watt hours we can get out of the 3000 watt AC inverter inside this CyberBox. All right, this thing is clearly beeping some form of SOS and Morse code. Clearly we're done here with the AC discharge test. Let me plug this in and we'll find out how many watt hours we got. All right, we got, wow, a whopping 3,620 watt hours out of a rated 3,840. That is a very high performance number at about 94% of rated capacity. That would rank up in the probably top 5 in terms of usable capacity out of an AC inverter. So very, very good numbers out of this CyberBox 3000. Let's do some load testing on this CyberBox 3000. We've already shown in the previous test that it does output a full 120 volts, and it is a pretty clean output at that with very little harmonic distortion. So I've got a couple of space heaters that we're going to try to get the watts up here, and the screen is going to kind of be hard to see. So I'm going to go ahead and put the app, since this does have a Bluetooth app, the Licitti Bluetooth app for Android. I'm going to put that up on screen so we can monitor that. And once we get this thing at or right at maybe slightly above that 3,000 watts, we're going to run this thing for a full 10 minutes and make sure that it can hang. So let's go ahead and start the fun. All right, so I'm going to turn the AC inverter on. I already have a space heater hooked up, and it should start kicking in here momentarily. I can hear the fans already starting to kick up there. In fact, let me go run and get the decibel meter. All right, so at just about 1,500 watts, without me talking, it's about 53 decibels. So pretty quiet so far. Let's go ahead and add some additional load and see where this gets us. By the way, each of these 3 ports are 20 amp ports. So up to 25 amps total for that 3,000 watts, but each port can handle 20 amps. All right, we are just under that 3,000 watt threshold right now, 2875. I'm going to plug in another couple hundred watts and we'll see if that trips us or not. We are getting an overload alarm and it did shut us down. So that would have put us over the 3,000 by about 80 watts because that was going to be a 200 watt pole. And so it definitely does not like that. So let me try something else. Let me shut the AC inverter off and let's turn that back on and see where that gets us. That should reset the AC inverter. So we're getting an alarm even at 2675 or 2876. So it's warning us. All right, I can't dial it in really any much closer than that, but we have 2871. So let's go ahead and see if we can run that for 10 full minutes, even with that alarm. All right. We made it. 10 full minutes. Now we didn't get to 3,000 watts. We got to, for most of it, just a little over 2,800 watts, maybe 2,850 to 2,860. And there at the end, we were just right around, call it 2,800, floating just a hair above or below that because of the voltage drop. And so, yeah, this thing does not quite get to 3,000 watts. I think you can get there for very short bursts, but it is not going to let you really run fully continuously at 3,000 because it will start alarming and then probably shut you down. So, but you can definitely get at least 2,800 watts and then some out of it. So just be aware of that. Okay, since there's a 25 volt input limit on the regular MPPT charge controller for the CyberBox, I need to keep that under 25 volts, right? So I have a voltage open circuit or VOC rating for each one of these 200 watt Bouge RV solar panels, and that is about 23 volts approximately, which is less than the 25 volts. Well, I'd like to get more than 200 watts in if I can, so I'm going to connect 2 of these 200 watt panels together to get a 400 watt input. But the way I'm going to do that is I can't do it in series because that would give me about 46 volts open circuit in if I connect them in series. So instead, I've got these little parallel adapters here, and this one just takes the negative input from one panel and the negative input from the other panel. And then I've got another set here that is the positive input from one panel and the positive input from the other panel. And those are then connected in parallel, and that leaves me with these 2 MC4 connectors down here, positive and negative, and that will allow me to have a voltage at the input side of somewhere between 20 and 23 volts. And we're going to double check that. Now, just real quick here, the port indicators here are all listed on this label on the top, and it's this yellow port right down here, and you can see right there it says 12 volt solar input, maximum 700 watts of power, I assume is what WP means. It doesn't tell you, it says 12 volts, that doesn't tell you what the max is. And the max, as I said, is in the manual if you dig it up, and it is 25 volts. So we're going to take the included MC4 cable here, and we're going to connect it to this port. But before we do that, we're going to check the voltage on my solar input over here and make sure that the voltage coming off the panels is not, in fact, anywhere close to 25 volts. All right, checking the voltage up here. Hopefully you can see that. and we are currently getting 17.37 volts. And that again is because they are connected in parallel. And we won't really get anywhere near that 23 volts open circuit rating, but we will probably get upwards of about 20 or 21 volts when the sun really starts to hit the panels. Just in the worst case scenario would we get the 23 volts, and we'd still be okay because we are under that 25 volt maximum. So this configuration is fine. I'm going to go ahead and flip the breaker here. So we are now connected live to the solar panels. And then just to point out, you can see that we do have 0% state of charge. And we're getting an alarm out of the unit to tell us that we are at 0 state of charge. The big thing though I want to see is if this will resume solar charging in the morning on its own without me having to do anything. And we do have it, like I said, in the off position. So we'll check back in the morning and see. All right, well, I discovered that you actually do need to leave the main disconnect to the on position in order to get solar input. So as you can see, if I turn this off, my input watts will drop to nothing. And so I have to have it in the on position for the MPPT charge controller to, I guess, pull a little power from the battery so it can accept a charge and then begin putting power into the battery. So now we're pulling in, looks like 140 watts. The sun is not anywhere near being properly aligned at this point since it is pretty early in the morning. So we'll just kind of monitor this. We'll check back around noon and see if we are getting anywhere near, like say the 200 to 300 watts. I'm not exactly sure what the cap is on this, but we'll find out. All right, it is about 1:30 in the afternoon. The sun is pretty much directly overhead, and the two 200 watt solar panels I have connected in parallel are fully exposed to the sun. And we're still only getting 100 and, well, we got a little bit of clouds probably that just moved in, but we were getting about 155 watts. And I doubt that we would actually get much more than that. So we seem to be getting clipped by this charge controller. And kind of like some of the other Licitti battery boxes, they don't have a lot of solar input capacity if you use the built-in solar charge controller. Now you could instead also use one of these 50 amp input-output connectors on the side to connect an external solar charge controller that's capable of inputting a lot more power. So just for fun, let's actually try that. Okay, so here I've taken one of these Anderson connectors and I've crimped it on to some MC4 cables that are then going into a charge controller that is capable of outputting up to 40 amps. And I've got now 4 200 watt solar panels wired in series because this charge controller can handle it. But since this is a 12 volt battery, this charge controller senses that it's a 12 volt system, and so it can only supply a maximum of 600 watts under ideal circumstances on a 12 volt system. But the point is, I have bypassed the MPPT charge controller on this CyberBox 3000. And if we take a look at the display here, I might have to zoom in on this for you, but I'm now getting 460 watts instead of 160 watts. So I'm getting substantially more solar input now than I was getting before. So this is just a kind of a proof of concept to show you that if you do want to get something like this to save the money on getting a budget system with this monster amount of capacity, then you can still do the solar charging and be substantially functional with that if you use an external solar charge controller. Now, I did do a couple of additional tests off camera, and the AC inverter's no load draw over the course of a 24-hour period on this unit does seem to draw about a constant 7 watts, which is really quite good for an inverter this size. And it would certainly qualify as one of the lowest no load draw numbers I've seen. And that equates to a loss of only about 4% of state of charge over a 24-hour period, which is quite a good thing since there's no actual timeout period where the power station will automatically shut it down for you. I also did my long-term DC fridge test to make sure that the very intermittent power draw from a DC fridge would not cause the power station to time out and shut down. And unsurprisingly, the CyberBox 3000 did pass that, even a 5-day test with no issues, since again, there's really no AC or DC auto shutdown timers on the unit. Okay, let's do a quick wrap up with some final thoughts on this CyberBox 3000. At the current US price of $1,680 or 44 cents a watt hour,
This is probably the least expensive power station you're going to find with this much capacity without actually DIYing your own version. And even then, I think it'd be pretty hard to actually beat this price when you factor in the cost of all the the little bits and pieces like wiring and connectors and fuses that you need to do it properly, to say nothing of what your time is actually worth. Now that said, you are giving up a few things with this unit. First of all, there is no UPS mode, which may or may not be important to you. Charging, especially solar charging, is pretty slow, and again, that may or may not be a big deal for you if you're not planning on relying on solar charging that much. But if you are, you definitely want to consider using a higher capacity charge controller like I demonstrated earlier. The other thing I'd point out is that it does come with only a 1-year warranty, which is pretty short compared to most of the other pre-built power stations out there on the market. But then I'd also point out that this unit, unlike those other ones, is completely built with standard off-the-shelf components. So if you ever did have a component failure at some point, you would be able to fairly easily repair the unit yourself. So it's kind of like having all of the benefits of a DIY unit without actually having to build it yourself. Oh, one more thing I'll share is that if you do decide to get one of these, be aware it's extremely heavy at about 100 pounds, and they do pack these things for shipping super well, including encasing the entire outer shipping box in foam. But you definitely want to open the box in front of the delivery guy to make sure it didn't get dropped and banged up during shipping, because that outer layer of foam on the shipping box would easily hide any kind of shipping damage. So just keep that in mind. And per usual, I will put a link in the description below for you if you do want to go check this thing out, along with a link to a Google spreadsheet that you can download and then plug in the inverter and battery capacity numbers for this unit so you can see what kinds of things that the CyberBox 3000 will run and for how long it can run them. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I do hope you found at least something helpful in the video. If you did, I appreciate it if you'd please consider clicking on that like button for me. It really does help. And if you're not already a subscriber, maybe consider subscribing as well. I do sincerely thank you for watching this video with me, and I hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.